Ian R. Crane, and I'm a specialist in deep geopolitics. But I also have 20 years experience in the oilfield services industry with Schlumberger Oilfield Services.
What are your thoughts, I think concerns, about what's being proposed by Cuadrilla here on the Fylde coast?
The major concern is that what is not being told to the people here are the longer term impacts of the hydraulic fracturing process. And this isn't conjecture, this is fact. I mean, if we look at the situation today in the western United States, particularly in Colorado and New Mexico, northern Texas, Oklahoma, where they've been extracting shale gas for 20 odd years. And one of the common denominators is contamination of the water, of the soil, and also of the air. And the effect that this has on the communities is horrendous.
Now, obviously what Cuadrilla would say, what the government here would say, is that there will be much tighter regulation, the geology is different, it won't be the same experience as it is in America.
Well, they don't have the regulatory processes in place yet because this country has no experience. And let's understand that the track record in this country is 2 wells drilled, 2 wells fracked, and 2 seismic events. Now, obviously, at the moment we haven't seen anything in terms of contamination. But what we're talking about here is in the Fylde Peninsula alone, Cuadrilla are proposing to locate 120 pads. Each of these pads will be about the size of 5 football pitches. Each of these pads will have at least 1 vertical section, and then each of these vertical sections will have 8 horizontal sections going off of them. And this is literally then creating a network of gas fields. And what they're going to be unleashing into the geology is literally millions of gallons of water with something in the region of 5% additive, the frac fluid. And this is the other issue that I have, because the industry is not transparent. I mean, the Advertising Standards Authority have already hauled Cuadrilla over the coals for being economic with the truth.
On the other hand, Cuadrilla say they've named the chemical that will be used. It'll only be one. It's a commercially available lubricant that appears in other products.
But the oil industry...
You don't believe them?
Well, the oil industry has a history of mission creep. And that is that basically, I mean, you have to understand it. I mean, the people who are behind this, they are looking at enormous financial returns. And unfortunately, the industry is driven by greed, and more greed. And of course, I mean, we've got the corruption right at the very heart of government here, because Lord John Brown, who sits on the cabinet with a special responsibility for business ethos, but he's the chairman of Coastal Oil and Gas and also on the board of Cuadrilla.
But when you mention the money, a lot of local communities stand to make an awful lot of money as well. Now, that might be a factor which could override even the concerns that you're voicing.
But they don't stand to make any money. That's absolute myth. In fact, a few weeks ago, there was a conference in Manchester with a lot of these companies who are on point to start the shale gas operation. And one of the major topics for discussion was what they call social license. Now, social license actually is another phrase for public apathy. In other words, getting the public into a position where they're not going to object to the arrival of the industry. And one of the propositions that was put forward was that a fund be established just in excess of £1 billion to use to bribe communities effectively to allow the shale gas industry into their area. But the reality is that the communities are going to get sort of very negligible benefit. They might get a new community centre, they might get a new playground for the kids, but that's a hell of a price to pay for ultimate contamination of the water, the soil and the air.
Or they might get those community centres and playgrounds and no contamination, a safe environment, cheaper energy bills and so on. It may not all go wrong. People might say you're just doom-saying and scaremongering.
Well, that's very easy for people to say, but I would encourage them actually to look at the evidence in Colorado, the evidence in New Mexico, and even the evidence in southern Queensland, where they've only been fracking for the last 5 years. And in the course of my 63-day tour around the country, I show the video evidence of the contamination of the water, the soil and the air. And of course it's very easy to say, oh, it won't happen here. But the reality is that the contamination has occurred everywhere where this process has been unleashed. Now, it's not to say that every well will cause contamination, but we are talking literally thousands of wells here. And so, statistically, the risk is very considerable. And, whilst obviously people want to believe that this is clean and it's safe and it's not going to cause any contamination, once you start this process, you've unleashed something that can't be stopped. And so, 5, 10, 15, even 20 years down the road, there may be a horrendous price that future generations are paying for this dash to gas.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Smashing, yeah. Okay.